Today's show is sponsored by SCHIIT Audio. SCHIIT Audio designs and builds audio components made in the USA. Based in Valencia, California, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit SCHIIT.com or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. Welcome to a very special episode of The Occasional Podcast, Season 3, Episode 6. Today we tackle the lifelong question that's been burning in your brain. How do I get into reel-to-reel audio listening? Yes, folks, today we will tell you everything you need to know about how to get into this fantastic subgenre of a hobby. Wonderful little tweaks, reels that spin left and right, and with the right boxes ticked, maybe the best sound you've ever heard in your whole life. Also, don't forget to check out parttimeaudiophile.com and the occasional magazine available on parttimeaudiophile.com. Plenty of show coverage, reviews on high-end audio equipment, lifestyle coverage, tons of awesomeness for your wandering eyes to behold. The Occasional Podcast. How to get in to reel-to-reel.
R2R.
R2R.
R2R. That's what I kept seeing in all the articles I was reading. R2R.
That's what the cool kids call it.
Oh, is that what it is?
Reel-to-reel listening. So some say that reel-to-reel machines are making a comeback. They said that about vinyl, but really, if you're cool, let's think about it like this. If vinyl's here, you dive deeper into the pool. At the bottom,
it definitely is the deep.
There's no drain. It's just a reel-to-reel machine.
Yeah, down there. But clogging shit up. Those things are so heavy. They're so heavy.
There are tons for sale on eBay right now, used ones. Some say reel-to-reel is the new vinyl. Some say it's the next step in analog exploration. But first and foremost, reel-to-reel playback is a labor of love. The machines can be problematic in terms of wear and tear, getting service and parts. Good source material is kind of hard to come by. The machines need cleaning and repair. Sometimes, not all the time though, the parts can be expensive and hard to come by. Also contributing to the cost, good copies of an album can easily average $450. So I'm going to say it's not a budget. This hobby is not for the budget enthusiast, but this particular niche is even less so. And rare or close to the master transfers obviously can fetch even higher prices, right? And also I want to mention there is a risk of getting bamboozled by online sales because it's really hard to verify whether the transfers for any given copy are legit, real. There's really no verification process. So those are the negatives. But however, what are the positives?
What are the positives?
There is obviously a super fun idea to have exclusive collections.
Yeah.
Reel to reel. It's so close to like the real thing, like the original source. I mean, we're not talking about like, like these things are cut close to the original tapes, which makes the chase like being the best looking guy at a bar.
There's a treasure hunt aspect to this whole thing.
Yeah. And it's really along the lines of the ultra high end with all the right boxes ticked. It can be the best playback available from analog source. It can be the pinnacle. To quote something from our interview with Greg Beron of United Home Audio, who makes these really high-end, amazing reel-to-reel machines, and they look beautiful. He has clients that say they've taken vinyl as far as it can go, and now they need something more. This is the answer.
Well, he also says in the interview, which you're about to hear, it was recorded in tape. So I want to listen to it as close to how it was actually recorded. I found that to be pretty fascinating. I wrote an article for you at the show where I actually met Greg, and I instantly kind of fell in love with it. But what are your thoughts?
I have heard Greg's presentation with United Home Audio several times. It is not digital. Let me say that. I've heard really, really good digital sound great, but it has a feel to it.
Sure.
Plus a fidelity and an intimacy with really good stuff, everything aligned. It's pinnacle stuff. Now you need pinnacle gear to get it there, but you get a sense of true analog vibe combined with a nuanced livability. Like, it's like they're there. It's like you're in the studio, I guess. When it comes to the Beatles, that's a time capsule shit. It doesn't exist anymore.
And part of that is the way it looks, is the two gigantic 10-inch reels spinning. It almost looks like, that's how it would have looked when they pressed record when they were in Abbey Road. I did kind of a deep dive the last 2 days watching a lot of YouTube videos, and there's some really great ones. One guy was like, in the title of the YouTube video was basically like, if you put this in your living room and then you have a really nice piece of art, everyone's going to ask about this. Yeah. Like, this is the one curiosity that people will walk into a room and like, what is that? Do you record music? No, that's a reel-to-reel. That's how I listen to music. Yeah. So there is an aspect of it just looking super cool. I think you were surprised with this. Back in the late 90s, when I first moved to Los Angeles, I actually managed the apartment building I lived in, and I found a gigantic box of vinyl records that one of the other managers 10 years ago, earlier, had left behind. Well, there was also a reel-to-reel machine that he left behind. It was a TIAC A63, which I just looked up on eBay, is worth $900. Yeah.
What? Do you still have it?
No. I put it in my apartment, and it was a conversation starter, plain and simple. Now, this is like pre-eBay, so I had no idea where you would even get any music. I had no music to play on it. It just looked cool. At NYU, we had done like a sound class, so I had like these projects that weren't music. There was like, ridiculous skits. Nobody wanted to hear hear those, but that's what I had reeled on there. The real thing that I remember about it is that it weighed a fucking ton. It weighed so much. And then when my future wife moved in, I had to give it, she didn't want that thing in there. I couldn't give it away. So I threw it away. It went into the dumpster. And
then he lit a stack of $100 bills on fire right after basically.
That. But, the one thing that I guess doing the dive into this is that if you are going to get into it, it's a money thing. Yeah. There is a money pit aspect to it. One of the guys that on YouTube I was listening to was talking about how he wanted to get one that could play those 10-inch reels. So that was a special machine unto itself. Mm-hmm. I mean, in your interview with Greg, he talks about the decks that play versus the studio decks that record, and everyone wants a studio deck, but in reality, that's not really great to listen to it. And he'll get more into that. So if he wanted to have the 10-inch reels on the deck that he bought, he had to buy these little adapters. Those cost $400. $400. There's a remote control that is a wired remote control that costs $400. Like, every little aspect of this costs money. And like you were saying in the intro, you got to keep it clean. One of the guys I saw on YouTube had bought a few of them. He's like, the belts were constantly breaking in the back. There was an aspect where the stopping mechanism wouldn't work and would shred the tape because it would never stop, or it would rewind too fast. I found interesting, and you'll talk about it more in Greg's interview, is the mechanism of the timing can be off. So all of a sudden it's not playing at the right pace and you're listening to the Chipmunks. So there's definitely a labor of love that goes into it. And every reputable source that I saw was selling the reel-to-reels, they're all $400 plus for one album. I do feel like it's one of these things where if you've exhausted your vinyl collection and you just have money lying around, then this is the next thing for you. Have fun with it.
That being said, I did want to throw out there, if you are a tinkerer or all these things don't sway you like me, you know what? I would like to do that stuff. I would like to touch something with my hands, play with something mechanical, and reap the rewards of it. There are a couple of options out there. And like I said, eBay is your friend. Yeah. You send it on eBay. The machines, sometimes they can start at $100 to $200. The Pioneer RT909, 707, 701. The Quad Akia reel-to-reel. There's TIAC, like you said. Ravox. Stellavox gets a little bit more expensive sometimes. But these brands are available. Just Google them on eBay and you can start your adventure. Just think of it as an adventure. A very expensive adventure in the end. But if you're looking for the highest in fidelity, really you got to start to turn to people like Greg, who offer $15,000 options, and you already got. If you're done with vinyl and you want something else to do, I mean, life is you can live a long time.
And we talked about this in the article. If you're buying something from Greg, you are buying a piece of art. Like, you're buying something that is an original piece. Like everything he makes is completely original to what you're buying. The look of it, everything that goes inside of it. Now, we were at Amoeba Records not too long ago. We looked for reel-to-reel at the Hollywood store.
There's a dusty box in the back.
In the back, right?
There's nothing in it anymore.
No, I don't think so. But so I got online and went to their website and I was like, do they sell reel-to-reel? And I actually don't have the answer to that. But here is what they had at the very bottom of one of their pages with like 6 stars next to it. Currently, our Hollywood store is not offering cash for Laserdiscs, 8-tracks, or reel-to-reel formats. These obsolete formats can generate store. Yeah, seriously. These obsolete formats can generate store credit, but in most cases, it will be in the range of nickels, dimes, and quarters. So I find you're not going to just have a plethora of places to go to actually buy these reel-to-reels, which vinyl.
I mean, in the brick and mortar. Now, I will say this: there are plenty of places that sell them online.
Yes.
If you just Google it online, you can find a
But there's an aspect. That's my favorite part about collecting vinyl is going to Amoeba Records or there's a few other record shops.
That is true.
And you're going to the
record
bins.
shop bin. It's fun.
Yeah.
The exploration is fun. The collection is fun. This though,
this is the deeper dive, like you said.
This is the deeper dive. You have to. So that being said, we at a retail location, probably very rare. I do know that they used to sell reel-to-reel things way back in the day with artwork on the cover and everything. It did exist. So you can find used copies. They don't usually produce new stuff unless it's in these niche audiences. A lot of jazz, a lot of classical.
Yep.
A lot of people who record it themselves, you can get it. So here's what's really fun and crazy is that because you're moving closer to the source, the distribution is moved closer to the source.
Oh, interesting.
And I would say if you meet people, talk to people, find people, and do the old-fashioned networking thing, it is possible to get amazing stuff. But it's all just kind of complicated, and it's people knowing people.
It's the treasure hunt, like we were saying. Yeah. So, and it does look cool. I mean, it's in Pulp Fiction.
You know what? It is in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
That is correct. She goes and she does like this huge, elaborate button push, boom, and then what was the track?
Verge Overkill.
And Verge Overkill.
The Neil Diamond track.
Yeah.
Girl. The second episode I sing in. You'll be a woman, baby shark. What? No. Here's the other thing too, is that which I found interesting. So The Verge actually wrote an article in 2015 about reel-to-reel becoming the new vinyl.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and what they wrote in the article, which I found interesting, is that reel-to-reel, even back when it was coming out, was a rich man's thing. Like you know what I'm saying? The common people had record players. But if you had the high-end system, they had the reel-to-reel, but you had to have money to have that. Yeah. So it hasn't changed. It's always been in the higher echelon of the audiophile world, I would say.
Sure. And again, it's just that intimacy with the production, being close to the source. You could, I mean, come on. If you have a really cool recording that no one else has, how fun is that?
It's pretty cool. But there's also an aspect of like having to listen to it, like people get annoyed like having to put a needle down.
Oh yeah.
Like you got to string it up. It has to all be done correctly. On some of these machines, you have to literally rewind the entire thing and then switch the reels to be able to listen to the other side. I mean, there's some work that can go into it. But I guess if you've committed to it to that extent, that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
So
if that's the type of person you are, this could be your jam.
This could be. Can we come play with you?
Yeah. Can you do all that? And then I will give us a call. You text me once that the reel's all set up, and I will sit on your couch and drink your booze. Thank you. So on with the show. Here we go. My man and yours, Greg Beron from United Home Audio.
Roll it.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Special edition show today. How to get into reel-to-reel sound. Our very special guest, Greg Beron from United Home Audio. They make specialized audiophile reel-to-reel machines. Thanks so much for joining, Greg.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Appreciate it.
I am very excited for this because I am not a wizard at reel-to-reel, and I'm very excited to learn some new stuff today from you and your massive pool of knowledge on the subject. But just to kind of kick things off from a broad stroke, from what is reel-to-reel listening exactly?
Well, for a guy like me, a geezer audio guy, all of the music that I really like was recorded on tape back in the day. I mean, I'm a rock guy. Of course, love jazz, love classical and the whole bit, but old geezer rock is my thing. Zeppelin, Stones, Beatles, all the stuff I grew up with. But, after becoming an audiophile, I guess when I was 14, 15 years old, mowing grass, trying to, buy a Macintosh amp and a nice set of speakers, I was monkeying with reel-to-reel. Buddy of mine and I kind of hobbled one together as best we could with limited funds, and got a couple of tapes, just quarter track, 3 3/4 stuff. I mean, very low quality, but it was very impressive back in the day. And today, being a hardcore audiophile, all of the music that I like was recorded to tape, so it hit me, hey, look, if when the tape project started issuing tapes, and I figured, Jesus, if I could get some of these master tape copies, all I need is a deck. So I fooled with one and hobbled one together and was playing it and liking it. And actually a big speaker manufacturer came to my store. He says, "What's that?" I said, "It's a reel-to-reel I'm monkeying with." "Oh, let me hear it." So played it for him. Says, "Oh, you got to do Rocky Mountain with me. You got to do Rocky Mountain." And at that show, I guess Jonathan Vallen from the Absolute Sound heard the deck. A lot of other people heard the deck. And John said, "Hey, I'd like to review the deck." So sent him a deck, and he wrote the most amazing review. It was on a Phase 11 tape deck, and I brought him a copy that I had found of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And that struck a chord with him from back in the day, and he just went nuts and wrote about it. It was a beautiful review, strongly recommended. But that's kind of how I progressed into it. And, for audiophile guys, everybody, first thing they want to do is pick up a studio deck. Well, studio decks are great in studios. They're the jackknife of what needs to be done with tape. They need to do 3 3/4 inch, 7.5 inch, 15 inch, 30 inch, and all the associated EQs with each of those. And you end up with a spaghetti bowl of wires, and that's not an audiophile idea. An audiophile idea would be to have it as the signal path as clean as possible. And that's what I've been working on. Since all the music I like was recorded to tape, hey, why change the format? Why go to digital? Why even go to vinyl, for crying out loud, if you can get to tape? And for the last, 13, 14 years, that's basically been my goal.
So how are the sonic benefits actually rendered on this format compared to digital like CD and so forth?
Well, first of all, if it was recorded originally to tape, like I said, why mess with it? Just stick with it. And not to mention that every time that they change something, they may change EQs. They may change who knows what, a person may do with the original tape. So my thoughts are just go back to the tape. So that's been my work for quite some time. And luckily, in the past years, the format seems to be growing in the high-end audio world, and more people getting into it. And one of the more important things is the people producing the tapes. because, you can have the best tape deck in the world, but if you don't have anything to play on it, well, what are we going to do now? So I think right now, if I had to put a number on it, I'd say there's probably a little bit under 500 commercially available tapes, and it could be almost anything. Gosh, what year was it? I can't even remember. It was at CES. I met Jan Erik with Opus 3 Records. Of course, I knew who he was, so I was all over him. Hey, you gotta issue tapes, man. You're doing everything but not tape, and you have the tapes. And so I kind of talked him into it, and he did it. He started issuing his tapes, and not only did he issue the tapes, but he also did compilation tapes. I think he's up to like 7 of them right now. And there's some great stuff on there, every kind of thing you could imagine. Eric Bibb is one of his artists, and not to mention, the Swingin' Swedes. He has some recordings of some Swedish artists that play New Orleans jazz that is just absolutely impeccable. I mean, I'm from New Orleans. I grew up listening to it all my life. And, when I heard Black Beauty, I was like, oh, my God, now we're talking. So Jan Erik was an early adapter. I also talked Yarling Records into issuing tape way back when. I think they even credit me for crying out loud on their website somewhere for trying to talk them into it. And there's just been a lot of other people coming along as well, and not just, from all over the world. Gosh, Italy, there's a number of different, even the Pavarotti tapes for Harmeling, God, don't quote me on that exact name, but there's a bunch of people now that are issuing tapes. Of course, there's a big underground thing about tapes, too, because there's just so much of that out there. If you think about it for a minute, all of these recording studios that pressed vinyl, if they didn't order the tape with an RIAAEQ and they ordered the tape from the studio with, say, even an IEC or an NAB, well, those are usable. And some people, you can find them here, there, yonder, and there could be anything. It could be good, could be bad. You never know. The commercially available tapes that are out there, the 500, let's say, you know what's going on with those.
How much would you say the average cost is for a tape, reel to reel?
I think the cheapest guy out there might be Ed Pong with Ultra Analog Recordings, and he has some very, very nice artists. I mean, really great violinists, cellists, pianists, and he records them. The tapes are really kind of fun because the artists are so good. And I think he's about maybe $250 for a tape, $250, something like that. I think the average price, it used to be $300 from the tape project, and it's gone up to like $450 now. So the first thing that the people are probably thinking out there is, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. Well, here's what I tell people. I ask a customer, how many LPs do you have? Oh, 3,000, 5,000, 8,000. How many of those do you really listen to? Oh, gosh, I don't know, 30, 40 maybe? Well, look at all the money you spent. You could have bought 30 or 40 tapes for that money and you listen to exactly what you want, and it sounds the best it could be. Mm-hmm. So it's all a matter of where you want to spend your money.
Do these tapes ever become available on like eBay, or are there any like circles where you can buy a tape, like by auction, or even like a forum? Is there a forum that specializes in reel to reel, or is it blended in with the rest?
Oh, there's a Tape Heads forum, and most of the forums out there have a pretty nice section on reel to reel. Some have on cassettes, you never know, but there's a lot of information out there. There's certainly on eBay, there's a lot of things on there. I've been tempted. I've made mistakes. I have bought things off of eBay, and I got them and went, oh, my God. One that was extremely frustrating was I was guaranteed that this was the real deal. Mm-hmm. Well, lo and behold, I'm listening to it going, oh my, this is not right. This is not right. What is that noise? Oh my God, sounds like a vinyl recording. And then at the end of the tape, I heard the needle go into the lockout groove whoosh, 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 on the tape. So lost my money on that one. So caution, I would say, is prudent.
From a technical perspective, though, what would you say is the best way to get a copy? Because there is the idea, I guess, that there's like a daughter or a grandchild. I'm not sure what the next one is, but it's like how many. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but there is a procession of how many times it's been removed from the master copy. Is that correct?
Yes, and you never know that. I mean, there's no way you can't look at a tape and tell. You can't test it really and tell. You just don't know, and that's the way it is with buying a record. You don't know what it's going to sound like until you put it on. A lot of times I bought things that, Japanese pressing should be amazing. I put them on and go, oh, what happens here, So it's very difficult to tell what's what. And, there's just so much out there. I often, look at eBay and, long for maybe getting a rose instead of a bunch of thorns. But not always the case.
And then, in very simplistic terms, what do you think a really good copy sounds like? What are the qualities that you look for when you're evaluating? How do you, in your mind, you said, oh, this is not good and this is good. This is a rose and this is a thorn. What does a rose sound like to you?
Well, tape can do dynamics quite forcefully. The bass, but not only the bass, the mid-range, even the high frequencies. I did a demo earlier. Somebody wanted to hear Dead Can Dance, and Lord knows where I came up with this copy. But they wanted to play The Wind That Shook the Barley. They said that they'd never heard anything like it in their life because they'd never heard Lisa Gerrard's voice go from high to low with such timbre and three-dimensionality. Those are the kinds of things you're looking for, the dynamics, the clean sound. It's the analog with no pops and clicks. And after listening to tape for so long, I've got a very, very expensive vinyl rig sitting around doing nothing, and all I listen to is tape.
Because as a child of the 80s, the cassettes that I was raised on, and this is, unfortunately how I came into music, was either FM radio or cassette tapes. They're very, very noisy. And I just think it's glorious that you're saying the cleanliness of the format is what some of the allure is, because in my mind, tape is this dirty, horrible thing that has to be fast forward and take forever to get to the next song. And when the CD came out, I was like, oh man, look at this, one touch of a button, next song. Woo, how glorious. But I did want to ask you, is there any draw, for instance, this is a blanket statement that is not true for everything, but people will say, oh, hey, tube amplifier technology, it can be a little soft in the bass at times if it's not done correctly. Now, that's an overgeneralization, but it's one that still exists in some circles, and maybe it happens once in a while. Are there any drawbacks to the format that you're aware of that you think?
Well, the drawback, I think, ultimately is in the sound. And what I notice off a tape is the continuousness, the lack of edge or grit. Measurably, people will say CD measures way better than tape, but it doesn't sound as good. So what do you want, measurements, or you want good sound?
Do you think that it sounds good? The essence of it is more akin to like a really great vinyl record?
Yeah, well, that's where the vinyl came from. It was originally recorded to the tape.
Well, I know, but the CDs come from the original tapes as well.
Yeah. Well, I tell you one thing that we really haven't discussed yet, but you brought it up about cassettes. People ask me all the time, are these tapes stable? I mean, are they going to...
Yeah, do they wear down?
Yeah, is it going to wear out, and I'm going to end up with nothing? Well, remember the cassettes that you had in your car and you threw them up on the dashboard and let the sun bake them for weeks at a time and then pulled them out and played them and they played. Well, it's the same kind of thing. However, the tape format is much better now. The new Record the Masters tapes, Jean-Luc came to visit me when he took over the company. Very nice fellow. And he also spent some money on it. In other words, you know, they make this tape on rolls and it has to be cut. Now, you can cut it good or you can cut it not so good. When you cut it good and you look at the side of the tape, it all looks very even. When you don't cut it good, it doesn't look even, and you don't want that unevenness to pass across your tape head because you want it stable. Well, Jean-Luc has spent the money, and he's still producing the SM900s and SM911 tape and the whole bit, but he's got a new formula. He hired a new chemist. And with the new manufacturing, this tape is really good.
So you're saying this is actually a technological advancement in tape?
Basically, using modern day tools and cutting devices and stuff, of course, is going to be better than it was back in the 50s.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that all makes a big difference. But the great thing is that he is very committed to doing it and is doing a great job selling a quality product, got new distribution and the whole bit, because tape is on the rise. You know, let me make that perfectly clear. My business is way better than it was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever. And now all of a sudden, when I first started this, Brian, you know, guys that open the door and they point and laugh at me and ask me if I have 8 tracks and stuff like that. And, you know, so it was a little tough sledding at first. But now, you know, it's completely different. People tell me, I came to the show just to hear this. And not only do we do, you know, the show demos, but we also do these after-hours analog tape events that have gotten very, very popular. Every time we do them, the room is filled. Last night, at 11:30 at night, people are up dancing to AC/DC Back in Black, you know, at 102 dB or something.
I would love to hear that, because the original CD that I had growing up as a kid, it sounded a little thin. It sounded a little dry to my ears, at least, that I can recall. Is it pretty juicy on your copy?
Well, I'll have to play it for you.
Okay, guys, gotta go. Gotta cut it short. I'm just kidding. Just for a more kind of a deeper dive, there are different technologies, or are there different tape sizes? How does that work?
Yeah, there's the cassettes used an eighth of an inch tape. Typically, I like the 1/4 inch because it's the raw tape isn't so expensive. You can get so much information off that tape. I know from doing this for so long. I mean, I started out with a phase 1 tape deck. I went to a phase 12, and then I took a new tape deck to Jonathan Ballin from the Absolute Sound, and he says, "Kiddo, you got to call it an ultimate." And so I said, "Well, I'll call it an Ultima." Okay. So I went from Ultima 1 to Ultima 4, but every time there was a change, and every time things got better, I noticed there was more information on that tape than I had any idea of. So my goal is to see, well, how much can I really get off of that? So I don't stop research and development. I'm always researching, always trying to figure out what can I do to make an audiophile quality tape deck. Not a studio deck, you know, that does everything, but geared specifically to what sounds the best. The IEC EQ on a 1/4 inch tape is a better format, a better EQ than an NAB because it does less to the signal. Then you have 1/2 inch tape.
Well, so you're saying that the different tapes have they just produce different EQ curves?
Well, on a 1/4 inch tape or a 1/2 inch tape or whatever, you can use an IEC EQ or you can use an NAB EQ. A lot of in the United States, typically back in the day, they used a lot of NAB, and they used IEC in Europe. But what happened was the Tape Project, when they started out, they said, okay, what format are we going to use? And they said IEC, and they were correct because it's the cleanest EQ. Then when you go to a higher speed, like 30 inch per second, there's a different EQ. So there's a different EQ for 3 3/4, 7.5, 15, and 30. So that all produces quite a spaghetti bowl of wires, and that's not what your audiophile wants. But there's also 1-inch tape and 2-inch tape, and you can put, up to umpteen tracks on the thing so that, if they're recording an orchestra, a band, they want microphones all over, fine, they can do that. But then what happens is, and a lot of people don't really think about this, but they do record in multi-channel, okay? The Beatles, whoever, they recorded in multi-channel. And then some engineer has to sit down with all of those tracks and mix it down to a 2-channel mix-down master that is now stereo, okay? So then, who knows what he does? He could change EQ. He could do anything to any of these various feeds, and he can change the sound. That's really an art. That's quite an art, and it's a very complicated process, no doubt. But as close to that 2-channel mix-down master is where you want the tape that you own. That's the bottom line. And like you were asking earlier, how do you know? Well, you don't. So you either have to know somebody and that can give you the provenance, or you look at the tear sheets and you read, well, this looks like the real thing because I know this studio was actually doing this, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a little detective work sometimes that has to be done. But so if you're talking about antiques, or you're talking about old cars, or whatever it is, it's the same story.
What would you think are the steps that for someone who's brand new to the hobby that they should start to pursue in order to get into reel-to-reel listening?
Well, the first thing you got to do is find a deck, obviously, and
are there any ways to your products? What are the pricing start on your products?
Mine right now start about 15 and going up from there.
1,500,
15,000,
right?
1,500.
So, is there can you get a used reel-to-reel deck for hundreds, or is it all starting at that level?
Well, there's all kinds of things out there, absolutely, from eBay, from who knows where, Craigslist, all over. I mean, some guys, say, hey, my buddy was moving and throwing this out, and that's where I got it, So, but you know how that goes. You get what you pay for often. But there are all kinds of decks out there, and unfortunately, what you have to remember is these things, a lot of them were built in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and what kind of electronics were in things back in that time? I call it Sansui electronics from 1970, So that's not exactly where you want to be if you're an audiophile, but if you want to just get into it and dip your toes in the water, yeah, you can go on these places and find decks, but they also have to be properly calibrated. And unless you're an expert on that, probably better left to an expert.
So that being said, once you get into the budget side, what qualities or what characteristics do you look for in a high quality reel-to-reel machine? Okay,
here's what you need. You need something that's going to do 15 inches per second, and you need something that's going to do an IEC EQ. Because if you're going to play an IEC EQ on an NAB deck, it's not going to sound, it's not going to be right. So you have to have that. There are decks out there that are known to do that, and then there's some, manufacturers that just never did it. It was all NAB. So you just have to be, careful about that. But then in the same token, once you get it, you don't know if that's even... If the tape is properly calibrated for the speed, you don't know if drift has happened on it or alignment of the heads.
What is drift? What's that term mean?
Oh, it's just drifted off of its appropriate speed.
Oh, yeah. So you the actual speed at which the reel rotates can falter with age. And is that something that happens with age, or just banging around?
Absolutely. Banging around is a whole different story, but I'm glad you raised that. I buy raw decks all the time. I mean, I buy the Tascam BR20s whenever I see them, as long as they look like they're okay. But big warning to everyone out there: be careful of shipping. What I'll tell somebody selling me a deck: do not put this deck in a cardboard box with a bunch of newspapers around it, because it's going to come in damaged. And what happens? Here comes a box all falling apart with newspapers in it, and the thing is the chassis is bent. God knows what's happened. All danged up, beat up. I have so many of these decks in like a Tascam graveyard, and what I do is I just pull pieces and parts off of them as I need them, because otherwise I can't use them. So be very, very careful about shipping, folks.
You mentioned the Tascam. Are there other brands that you recommend for those kind of gold nugget finds?
Well, certainly, a lot of people gravitate to the studio decks, like the Studers or the ATR decks, MCIs, what have you. Techniques also, they make a deck that does have switchable IEC. They make decks that don't. Sony made decks that are pretty decent. So, yeah, there's a lot out there.
You obviously, one of the things that someone should look for in buying a deck is that it's not banged up, that it's quality. It's a reel-to-reel machine that deals with the IEC EQ that you already spoke about. What is something that you kind of offer on your high-end tables that make them different and unique and worth the cost that you ask for?
Well, the tape deck I chose has all DC motors in it. Very speed stable, very reliable. In fact, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, I bought 10 new reel motors, 20 new reel motors direct from Tascam, and all OEM. And I put them on the shelf, and 10 years later, they're still sitting there. The reason I chose the deck I'm using is it's reliable. Once you get it properly adjusted, you don't have to worry about it. The deck that I'm using at the show, I bet it's been shipped across the United States and to Europe for the Munich show. Oh, I'm guessing 50 times over the last 12, 13 years, and you cannot kill the thing. The other side of that is that because it had DC motors, I had a goal of making the entire deck run on DC power, no AC inside the box. So I built an outboard power supply, put 2 big toroidal power transformers in there. One just runs the motors, the VU meters, the transport. The other, all it does is run the dual mono tape head amps. So you have complete separation of church and state at that point, and I figured out how to run everything inside the tape deck on DC power. So I take the AC from the wall, and I convert it to DC, and the only thing in the deck is DC. That's it. So it offers another layer of quiet. But there's also one other very important point about that. If you have a big transformer inside the tape deck chassis, wherever it is, it's emanating a magnetic field. Is it a good idea to have a magnetic field around something on a tape where you're trying to read magnetics? Not the greatest. So when I took the power transformer out, wow, it was like, okay, now we're talking. So yeah, it's just a matter of so much time, so much research and development, so much money spent, but the goal is, I think, in hand. I think at this point in time, I've got a pretty good sound on the thing. It's selling, and that's what you need in any business. You got to have sales, or it's going to die.
So for vinyl, you usually have to have a phono stage that is in between the amplifier and the turntable in order to get it to work properly. Does a reel-to-reel machine need a phono stage?
No, they typically come with built-in head amps, is what you're calling, because you're amplifying the tape head signal. Call it a head amp. All tape decks, just about, I think maybe all of them do, have an internal head amp. Some people say, okay, well, if this was made in 1965 and I've got 1965 Sansui quality electronics in it, I should run to an outboard head amp. And yeah, you can do that. You can take a signal right off the tape head and send it to an outboard head amp, and that acts as your phono preamp kind of thing. And yes, you can do it that way too.
Or is it balanced output ever, or is it just single-ended RCAs from...
It depends on the deck. Like
really?
Yeah. Some decks just do RCA and don't do balance. Some do both. All of my decks are both.
Any kind of helpful tips or other kind of things you want to say to someone who's just starting to get into this and has a real passion for it?
Oh, boy, that's a big one. Take your time and think through what it is that you want to do. A lot of times I will ask a guy who's talking to me about a tape deck, well, what kind of system do you have? Because that tells me a lot right there. Mm-hmm. You know, if he says, well, I have Odyssey equipment and a pair of Vienna acoustic speakers, I'm saying, well, then, you know, you're probably not going to be spending above $10,000 on any source component. So maybe I can't help you. But, you know, if they have a killer system, which a lot of my customers have unbelievable systems. I mean, some of them have $150,000 vinyl systems, for crying out loud. That's just the vinyl rig.
Do you find that a lot of your clients come over from the vinyl world, or has anybody just come, like, I don't even have a turntable, I just want this?
They come both ways. I get guys that are like, okay, I've taken vinyl as far as I can push it. I mean, if they've thrown $100,000 to $150,000 at vinyl, my God, they ought to be right there, and they want that next step, you know. And for them, it's where else are you going to go? But from where the vinyl came from, go to tape. And then I have guys, which I always think are very interesting. They'll say, "Oh, I have this incredible, you know, server, and you know, it does this and it does that, and I got an incredible DAC system and all of that." But I was thinking about going into vinyl, but now that I'm thinking about that, maybe I ought to be looking at tape. And I tell you what, there's a hell of a lot of those coming at me now. Interesting. Very interesting, I thought, because, you know, they just never took the plunge into vinyl. And so now they see this new format coming, and it's people are saying it's better. Well, heck, I think I'll just go straight to tape. And so, in fact, I do have a funny thing you asked. The last tape deck I sold was to a guy just did that exact same thing. You know, take your time, think through what you want to do, deal with somebody who's going to give you a warranty. Because I tell you what, in the tape deck business, a warranty is a tough thing. Deal with somebody who's going to give you a warranty, somebody that you know is going to be around. Focus on a deck that you know is going to have parts available in the future. All of those are important things so you can have a lifetime of enjoyment.
Thanks so much for helping out. Appreciate it.
Sure. Anytime.